know this story, but trust me, you do not know the story of how corruption was legalized because it's been secret for decades. And we uncovered all sorts of documents exposing how they wrote it down. I mean, right, they wrote down how they were going to deregulate the campaign finance system and weaken anti-bribery laws. Americans in polls tell us that they hate the Citizens United decision, but as you allude to, the Supreme Court is literally right now going to hear a case that could dismantle whatever was left of America's anti-corruption laws after Citizens United. And it's a case spearheaded by J.D. Vance. So essentially what this case would do, what J.D. Vance is trying to do, is say that parties, the limits on how much parties can coordinate their spending with candidates should be essentially eliminated, which the effect of that would be, the reason the rules exist is to prevent what would end up being if this happens, which is that donors could simply funnel much larger amounts of money through parties to candidates, essentially using parties as a kind of shell corporation or a pass-through entity to flood much more money directly to candidates. So not even through supposedly independent super PACs. We're talking about much larger amounts of money directly into candidates. And the other case that's going on right now is a case that's trying to narrow the enforceability of anti-corruption laws. This is the line of rulings like the Bob McDonnell ruling, the Bridgegate rulings. So further narrowing it, there's an appeal at the court that cites, remember the story of Donald Trump soliciting $1 billion reportedly of campaign contributions from oil executives in exchange for promising favors. This appeal at the Supreme Court cites that situation to say, look at this, pay-to-play culture is now so pervasive that essentially we need to make it unprosecutable because pay-to-play culture is now essentially what politics is.
That's insane.
So
that's
if
the opposite of the way you should view that situation.
Exactly. I mean, it literally says, imagine if prosecutors prosecuted this kind of quid pro quo corruption, this would essentially criminalize all of politics.
Yes, imagine
that's where we are.
Well, you also talk about Ferraris there in the article. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so that's part of the case. That's one of the cases in this line of cases to weaken the enforceability of anti-corruption laws and anti-bribery laws. That quote from John Roberts, where he says, you know, this case is not having to deal with the tawdry details of Ferraris and Rolexes. It's about and this is his words, the overzealous, and I'm paraphrasing here, the overzealous enforcement by federal prosecutors of anti-bribery laws. That's the court's posture here. And it's worth noting that the court has been issuing these rulings, making it harder and harder to prosecute bribery, while certain members of the court are accepting lavish gifts from billionaires with business before the court. So in a certain sense, they kind of have an interest in making sure that bribery and this kind of corruption is unprosecutable.
That is such an important point, and one that doesn't go remarked upon enough. I did want to give people a little bit of good news here, though, because I saw you were talking on Twitter about how, you know, the commonly held belief is like, well, after Citizens United, there's not a lot we can do about campaign finance. It requires constitutional amendment. We all know how likely that is to happen. But you've actually been doing some investigating, and there may be actually some ways that individual states can help curb the corrupt influence of money in their politics.
Yeah, so this is actually some good news. In Montana, luminaries of both parties are pushing a ballot measure that takes a look at how to deal with money in politics in a different way than standard campaign contribution limits or disclosure requirements. The long and the short of it is that the idea that corporations are people that are entitled to the rights to free speech, with money being defined as speech. The whole idea that corporations are people stems from state incorporation laws that deems them or grants them the same powers as people under the law. The Citizens United case, all the campaign finance cases rely on those state incorporation laws. So what's happening in Montana is there's a ballot measure to say, okay, if that's the case, then we can change our state laws, to grant corporations certain powers, but not grant them other powers. Legal scholars will tell you that the corporations under the law are artificial entities created by state laws, which means, and we've done this in the past, way back, where we said, corporations have this as part of their charter. They have this power, and they don't have this power. In Montana, what they're proposing to do is say they have all the powers that they have, but they do not have the power to spend in elections. And here's the thing. I know people listening to this probably saying, well, doesn't it mean that a company could just move out of Montana and move to Delaware and then do what it wants? Well, the answer is not inside the state, because all state laws have a provision that essentially say, if you're an out-of-state company doing business in our state, you must comply with the basic laws and powers that we grant to corporations in state. So the point is, Montana doing this can change its situation for Montana. It doesn't have to wait for other states to move forward with this. And of course, then you extend it. You say, well, listen, states, blue states that are more inclined to do this right now don't have to wait to do it on their ballot. They could do it through their legislature. So I think what they're looking at in Montana is a template. And the thing is that the Supreme Court just recently and over many decades continues to have ruled that how corporations are treated flows from state law. And my point in saying that is that this is a way to use Supreme Court precedent to deal with the problem in a way that the Supreme Court has previously and repeatedly said is within what it considers okay under the law.
Very
really
clever.
interesting. So
Yeah.
David, how does this connect to the upcoming midterm elections?
Well, look, I think it's not. It's on the ballot in the midterm elections. So I think it's not going to be in place before the midterm elections. But look, I think the Democrats have a big problem in the midterm elections on the corruption issue, and I wrote about this recently, which is to say that in 2016, the last poll before the election showed Donald Trump losing on every issue except for corruption. If you can believe it, here in 2025, the most recent Reuters poll showed the Republicans have a similar lead on the issue of corruption as they did in 2016. Who do you trust to deal with corruption? The Republicans are actually leading the Democrats. And I think that's a huge problem for the midterms, because clearly it means the Democrats have not made a forceful case about how they are, whether or not they are serious about cleaning up corruption. And I think part of the problem here is that a lot of their anti-corruption argument is a purely anti-Trump argument. And it's not willing to concede the system is corrupt. And if you remember the John McCain race, I think back to that a lot, the 2000 John McCain race, where John McCain at one point almost won the Republican nomination. I would argue that the reason his anti-corruption message, and it was a pure anti-corruption message, the reason it resonated was because he was willing to talk about both parties. And I think a lot of voters saw that as, you're willing to be authentic and speak honestly about the situation, as opposed to just blaming one side for the problem.
Yeah, gave him his sort of maverick branding. Let's talk a little bit about a little more about the midterm. So there's this other Supreme Court case where it looks like the Supreme Court is poised to strike down additional aspects of, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. Let's go ahead and take a listen to Harry Enton talk about the impact that this could have on on the midterms.
Okay, so, if you go back 6 months ago, you go back to April, Kate Baldwin, what were we looking at? Well, we were looking at the Democrats with a very clear shot of taking control of the U.S. House of Representatives, according to the Kalshi prediction market odds. We saw them at an 83% chance. But those odds have gone plummeting down. Now we're talking about just a 63% chance, while the GOP's chances up like a rocket, up like gold, up from 17% to now a 37% chance. So we'll look like a pretty clear likely Democratic win in the House come next year. Has become much closer to a toss-up at this point, although still slightly leaning Democratic.
What's changed? What are you saying?
You go back to April, look at the generic congressional ballot. What you see? You see +3 Democrats in 2025 in April. You see +3 Democrats back in April of 2017. Now jump over to this side of the screen. What happens? Well, the Democrats are no longer keeping pace with the pace that they were setting back in 2017, 2018. You look back in 2017, you saw that the Democrats had leaped up to an 8-point advantage. If both sides max out, we're probably looking at a GOP gain of +7 House seats. That doesn't even take into account the potential gutting of the VRA that is right now going to be in front of the Supreme Court. If you add that in, you could be
the
looking.
Voting Rights Act.
What? Yes,
Voting
exactly
Rights.
right. The Voting Rights Act. If you add that in, then you could be looking about adding 10, 12, 15, 17 on top of this 7 seats.
So Nate Cohn of the New York Times did an analysis here and said basically if Republicans really max out what they could do with that section of the Voting Rights Act being, nullified by the Supreme Court, Democrats would need to win the popular vote by like more than 5 points to even have a prayer of winning back control of the House. So talk a little bit about that case and what, some of the details there and what you think the impact could be.
Yeah, so the case is basically making it easier to gerrymander. I mean, that's the top line for especially in Republican states. It basically would say that districts that are drawn in accordance with the old Voting Rights Act or the existing Voting Rights Act, districts drawn to make sure there is adequate minority.
Yeah, let's move on. The Humanist Report.
Go, go, go!
By the way, this isn't, Gaza, the West Bank. This isn't the IDF chasing a Palestinian. This is not Pakistan. This is not any type of developing country you can think of where there is an authoritarian type of government. No, what this is America, guys. This is America. And they're running after these, you have to understand, these are ICE agents, and they are currently taking anybody, basically. And so these fat, white, predominantly white, men who have nothing going on in their lives and just hate anyone who has any type of melanin in their skin, have decided that they can live their fantasy of being, a badass by signing up, getting paid, and basically cracking skulls of people they don't even know are illegal immigrants or not. I don't like using the word illegal immigrants. Undocumented is a better word, I guess. Anyways, let's keep watching.
That amazing video was captured in Chicago, Illinois by John Farina of Status Quo News, and they report that those 2 Gestapo agents decided to chase that man for no apparent reason. He was just peacefully standing outside of the Broadview Processing Center before they inexplicably chose to take away his First Amendment right. But as you saw, it didn't turn out so well for them. And for a second, I thought that the ICE agent who collapsed was momentarily trying to Naruto run to pick up speed. I was like, what is he doing? I'm like, oh, he's collapsing dramatically under the weight of Earth's crushing gravity, I guess. That is so amazing. And I don't know if his colleague was stopping to see if he was okay, as if he was injured, or if he was tired too, and he's like, should we give up? But the dude, they were never going to catch him. He just kept running, and he had more stamina than them. And they knew that it was pointless. They weren't going to be able to outrun this individual who's probably decades older than them. And I find that so hilarious. But even though this is an embarrassing video for ICE that I thoroughly enjoyed, it really does speak to how unqualified they are for their jobs. And I think that that's a benefit to us in some ways, right? They're physically unfit, but other viral videos expose how they don't know anything about the law or the Constitution, and they seemingly only got the job because they hate immigrants and love Donald Trump. And it's why nobody respects these fascist pigs. It's why nobody in America takes them seriously. In fact, some people are straight up roasting ICE agents to their faces.
See, that's exactly what I said. These are just a bunch of white nobodies who hate their lives and have these grand ideas of being this, badass gun-toting hero. But they don't know anything. They don't have any experience with law yet. They're now joined a law enforcement agency. They are probably and most likely racist. That's why they joined up, because they're looking to go after the people that they blame for the hardships that they face, right? Rising grocery prices, rising rent, rising lack of housing, a lack of jobs, even, right? But instead of blaming who they should be blaming, instead of blaming the society, the capitalistic society that creates this, no, they don't blame that. They blame immigrants. Because why blame the people who are taking the entire cookie when you can blame the people who are fighting for the same crumbs you are?
What's your real name?
What's your barber name? What's your barber name? What's your barber name? What's your name? What's your street name? I did. See it from Ice Age looking ass.
If you look closely, you can actually see his soul leave his body. I think it was the moment that he made eye contact and then looked away and pretended like he couldn't hear that they were clowning on him. That was honestly so brutal. But before you start to feel bad for him or any of these other cowards, understand that you shouldn't, because they're not just bad people. That would be one thing. They're also criminals. And even though it seems impossible to fully comprehend the depths of their depravity, I'm going to try to make it comprehensible. So the Miami Herald published a story about 64-year-old Subu Vadam, who is a man that spent more than 4 decades in prison for a murder that he did not commit. And after it was revealed that prosecutors withheld evidence during his trial that would have exonerated him, he was finally released after 43 years. But before he could even go home, guess what happened? He got snatched up by ICE. ICE cited a legacy deportation order dating back to the 1980s, tied not only to the murder charge, but also to an earlier drug conviction from Vadam's youth. Before his arrest for murder, he had pleaded guilty at age 19 to intent to distribute LSD, a charge his family describes as a youthful mistake. Although that conviction carried its own immigration consequences, Subu, who was born in India but arrived in the United States when he was 9 months old, was never deported because he was serving a life sentence. Now, after his exoneration, ICE has revived the decades-old order. So for all intents and purposes, he's what we...
So he spent falsely, or for no reason, he spent all those years in jail, and now they're going to deport him. Friggin' America, dude.
He'd call a dreamer. He was brought to America at a very young age, not on his own accord, and he's basically an American. An American who, after serving most of his adult life behind bars for a murder he didn't commit, is now being detained by ICE because they chose to bring up this old-ass drug charge that he got when he was a literal teenager. And that's the justification that they're using to detain him even longer so they can meet their quota. Just let that sink in for a moment. But this story, it just speaks to one angle, their cruelty. We also need to talk about a different angle, which is how unhinged they are, and there are countless examples to illustrate this, such as this story from Willamette Week, where they report about how ICE agents blocked an ambulance from leaving when it was transporting someone from an ICE detention center to Legacy Emmanuel Hospital in Portland, Oregon. And it's unclear why this person needed to go to the hospital in the first place, but ICE agents didn't want them to leave and chose to stand in front of the first responders so they couldn't get out. So the ambulance driver decided to just put the vehicle in park, which caused it to lurch forward. This is what happens when you put a car in park. But the dumbass ICE agents took that as a threat, so much so that one of them literally threatened to shoot the ambulance driver, claiming that the ambulance was trying to hit him with his car. Now, unless that ICE agent has never driven a car before or been inside of a car or seen a car in real life, I have to imagine that that person was lying and they knew that the ambulance driver wasn't trying to run them over with their car and they were just using that as an excuse to be violent. I mean,
Maybe Mike's got a point, but what I think is actually happening is they're just not fully trained. They don't know how to, they're not real law enforcement. They're just a bunch of people who just signed up and joined the federal law enforcement agent because that's how America rolls now. What it is they don't know how to navigate in a high pressure environment like police need to know. And look, I'm gonna tell you right now that fully qualified and trained police barely can. So these losers definitely can't. You know what I mean? And so they're just so jumpy. And we're going to start seeing a bunch of, if it hasn't already been happening, I haven't seen any reporting, but leave it to CBS News to not say anything now that they're under the free press, and the mainstream media just has been garbage. but you're gonna start seeing them killing people because they get too trigger happy, because they're all jumpy because they don't know how to um navigate in this really high pressure, intense type of scenario. You know what I mean? Um, anyways.
Did he expect the ambulance driver that he was blocking to sit there with his foot on the brakes for who knows how long? It's ridiculous, right? But these power-hungry pricks apparently think that it's okay to threaten first responders now, even though they're the ones keeping the first responders from doing their job. Now, if the shoe were on the other foot, do you think that ICE would be as patient? If they were the ones where their vehicle was being blocked, do you think that they would like patiently wait there and put their vehicles in park? We already know the answer to this question. It's an unequivocal no. I say this because last week we shared a video of a motorcycle blocking them, and they responded by tear gassing the entire vicinity, including a 2-year-old who inhaled harmful chemicals. Now, over the weekend, when a different car was blocking 2 Border Patrol agents from a journalist that they were kidnapping, just watch what they did to that car.
What's your name?
Debbie Brockman, I work for WGN. Let them know.
I got you. Yep. Debbie Browning?
Brockman.
Brockman, WGN. Do you guys want to share your names too, or just going to cover your face?
Absolute ghouls. Absolute coward ghouls. It feels like I'm watching something coming out of Pakistan. No shade to the people of Pakistan, but they're under a brutal and oppressive regime, installed, by the way, by America. A journalist. They're arresting a journalist. They have their faces covered. They won't give their names. Just absolute ghouls, man.
For your face, couple years. Okay, Mr. Condemnation. Yeah. Oh my God.
This is ridiculous. Honestly.
Yeah.
Stop.
Good job. I hope you're proud of yourself.
Get the out.
Fuck you.
Get out of our...
Hopefully your wife and children make it home.
What is this vehicle, honestly? Yeah.
So a bunch of losers are driving their, their SUV. They take they can't spend time with their kids, so they're taking it out on journalists.
Get out of our neighborhood. Get out of our city. Come on now, man. Come on. Get out.
You know what they should do? They should. These guys are armed and they're not trustworthy. But what they should do is go up and just while they're stalled there, open it and grab the journalist and stand in front of her. But that's gonna just create people getting killed for no reason.
No, this is some bullshit.
Oh! Yep.
Very professional federal agents we have in this country, and definitely nothing like the Gestapo. Nope. But by now, everybody knows that this is what they do. It's not a secret, right? They're completely unrestrained and unhinged and cruel, and there are countless examples to demonstrate just how bad they are. A DHS agent shot a priest in the head with a pepper ball for the crime of peacefully protesting. And increasingly, DHS agents are surveilling protesters from roofs with sniper rifles, as if exercising your First Amendment right makes you a potential criminal.
This is what happens when American law enforcement is funded by, or not funded, sorry. It's trained by the IDF. This is exactly how the IDF treats Palestinians, except they're not using pepper balls to shoot priests in the head. They're using actual sniper rounds to snipe kids and imams in the head. It's crazy to me.
Also continuing to use tear gas on crowds who peacefully try to stop their human abductions. And I can't stress this enough, but when you have a violent, masked, secret police force whose agents don't identify themselves, who kidnaps people and journalists and places them in unmarked vehicles, who intimidates, harasses, and threatens people, you are witnessing quintessential authoritarianism. They are by no means upholding the law. In fact, they're operating outside the bounds of the law and the Constitution, making everything that they do completely illegal. They are denying immigrants due process and habeas corpus, as well as their Fourth Amendment rights. They're detaining citizens and public officials and journalists, and they're not reading anyone their Miranda rights, let alone telling them if they're even being arrested in the first place. They're just fucking taking them, and this is all deeply unconstitutional. And them having some green light from Trump or Kristi Noem doesn't automatically make what they're doing legal or just. It's still illegal, it's still unconstitutional, but operating outside of the bounds of law is how secret police and other dictatorships terrorize civilian populations as well, making people feel as if they have to watch their words or look over their shoulders, and trying to foster this level of societal fear and paranoia is like how dictators assert control over populations. And it's happening here now, when a lot of us were naively thinking that this couldn't ever happen here. But it's important to understand that Trump isn't going to be in office forever, and there will come a day when his Gestapo might have to answer for the crimes that they're committing. And that's the exact point that this veteran made in an interview with Status Quo News. And this rant that he has about ICE is truly incredible. Let's watch.
And for you kidnappers known as ICE agents, understand this. You will never be fucking forgiven for your crimes, ever. The soldiers, I can understand, they took an oath. They're duty bound to be there. They can't just quit. You could fucking reclass tomorrow and go work for FEMA or do something else. If you choose to put a mask on, if you choose to send people to concentration camps, if you choose to do that shit, you will be a mortal fucking enemy forever. When that fucking demon is gone from the White House, you will be hunted, just like you hunted them. You will be hunted. You will never have a fucking moment of peace, period. Out of everybody.
Honestly, I hope he's right. But the way the Democrats had the opportunity to go after Trump, they had the opportunity to, convict and take legal proceedings against many of Trump's and MAGA and Trump's cabinet or people, like the MAGA cult, essentially. And they didn't do it because Democrats are the worst kind of opposition you could ever want on your side. They're the best thing for the Republicans because they're toothless and they're just ineffective. They're ineffective as the opposition. And so I truly hope this man is correct, but I'm afraid I'm afraid he won't be.
Everybody I despise the most, ICE is top of the list right now. You guys are fucking traitors, man. ICE is an absolute scourge. You should hold your head in shame forever for the shit you're doing. You will never be forgiven for that shit. If you had Australian dignity, you will reclass tomorrow.
And that's exactly why they wear these masks. They still want to be able to fraternize with their neighbors and live in the communities that they're terrorizing. They don't want to be held accountable one day for the crimes that they're committing. So behind those masks are the faces of spineless fucking fascist cowards who are carrying out Trump's fascist agenda in the shadows because, as dumb as they are, they know that they're not above the law like Trump is. So they're protecting their identities in hopes that they'll be able to evade prosecution one day. But you have to understand that this is only the beginning. ICE's budget exploded from the big bullshit bill, and the recruitment that they're doing now is soon going to turn into thousands of new Gestapo thugs in the streets. And they're not just hunting down immigrants anymore. As Truth Out reports, ICE is increasingly starting to target activists, specifically ones who are tracking their illegal activity on social media. And this story coincides with Trump's NSPM 7, which essentially designates anyone not in the MAGA cult as a potential terrorist, which then opens them up to government surveillance. But I mean, surveillance almost seems lenient compared to an option floated by Attorney General Pam Bondi.
Just like we did with cartels, we're going to take the same approach, President Trump, with Antifa. Destroy the entire organization from top to bottom. We're going to
They're going to destroy a organization that isn't an organization. And honestly, if they're so against Antifa, what are they, Profa? Because Antifa stands for anti-fascist. So, from my understanding, he's pro-fascism, which, I mean, everybody can see that he's a fascist and that America is spiraling into the deeper pits of fascism, you could say. But they're acting like Antifa is like some organized group like flipping Al-Qaeda. It's not. It's just if anything, it's more of an ideology. But anyways.
take them apart. Thanks to your bold leadership and the designation of Antifa as a terrorist organization, which is exactly what they are, Americans will no longer tolerate their unhinged violence.
I mean, they're bombing cartels, so does this mean that they're going to bomb Antifa? Is she broadcasting her intent to kill American citizens?
Oh, if they could get away with it, which I'm sure they will get away with it, it's coming. It's going to happen. Until we have a proper opposition, this is it's happening. Take it from someone who has spent time in a country that is under an authoritarian regime. An authoritarian regime installed by America. This is the beginnings of what you would see. Just the other day in Pakistan, a pro-Palestinian march, the military and police opened fire on a pro-Palestine march, killing the media. The media says 5, right? The government-run media says 5. I have watched videos myself that show them at least 60, 70 cases of like dead bodies, and there are reports of up to 1,000. Ryan Grimm was reporting from Dropsite News that it can be it's upwards of 1,000 people killed. There's a couple years before you reach that. But it's coming, and it's because you have a bunch of fascist losers who are terminally online and hate everything, hate their lives, hate the fact that their wives left them and they can't see their kids, so they put on a mask and they go out and start doing stuff like this. And eventually, one of them is going to be unhinged enough to start unloading into these protests.
Also, who do they define as Antifa? Because even though anti-fascism has a robust...
Oh, and sorry, I know I'm annoying that I keep doing this, but when that happens, when this deranged ICE agent eventually, empties a clip into a protest, understand that Pam Bondi and all of them will be happy that it happened, will behind closed doors celebrate it, but then they will say that this was an isolated incident and this is not something they condone, blah, 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 blah. Yet they let this unhinged person join a federal police agency. Mark my words.
history throughout the world, it just means anti-fascist at the end of the day, in simplest terms. So it's an action, not an organization, and they know that. And I think that most Americans would probably identify as anti-fascist. At least I hope that that's the case. But in terms of like who they're going to target, I think we have an idea, right? It's professors like Mark Bray, a historian who's taught courses on fascism and wrote the Anti-Fascist Handbook. And, you know, after he tried to follow in the footsteps of other political scientists and historians who fled the country, he was blocked from leaving and wrote on Blue Sky that his gate reservation had suddenly disappeared for no reason. Now, thankfully, he eventually did leave for Spain, but I can't help but think that them doing things like this to high-profile people, it also happened to Hassan Piker, is their way to send a message to the rest of us. They want you to know that they do indeed have control over your life. And if you oppose the regime, they have the ability to make your life a living hell. So I'd imagine that they're planning to target people like Professor Bray at first, who use their voices and platforms to expose this regime. We used to call that freedom of speech, by the way, but it's no longer guaranteed to us since the Constitution is no longer in effect. In fact, Trump was just bragging about taking away that right.
We took the freedom of speech away because that's been through the courts, and the court said you have freedom of speech. But what has happened is when they burn a flag, it agitates and irritates crowds. They've never seen it.
Some of the biggest people, the biggest free speech advocates, you could say, the people who cry about free speech, are the mega cultists. And now here's Trump saying that they are taking away free speech from Antifa. And I'm telling you right now, those mega cultists are going to be silent. They're going to be silent because their dear orange Hitler over here, I shouldn't have said that, I'm probably going to get banned now, but whatever, is saying that Antifa is a terrorist organization. And remember, everybody that voted for this guy was voting for him, like, and still supports him, support him because they just like to own the libs, right? They're a bunch of man babies who want to own the libs. they're silent now. Hey guys, I thought you guys were all about free speech. He's taking away free speech from a large part of the population, right? Antifa is not an organization. If anything, it's an idea. Anti-fascism. It's a stance. So unless you're pro-fascism, you should be against this. You should be against this. But you're not, because you're a loser.
Anything like it on both sides, and you end up with riots. So we're going on that basis. We're looking at it not from the freedom of speech, which I always felt strongly about, but never passed the courts.
In other words, we know that flag burning is protected speech under the First Amendment, and this right was even reaffirmed by the Supreme Court in 1989 in Texas v. Johnson. But we don't care, and we're going to take away that right anyway, because what Trump says goes. The law is what he says it is. But don't let these bastards scare you into silence, because as risky as it is to speak out these days, it is so much more dangerous for all of us to remain silent. So keep sharing videos of ICE and BPD and DHS on social media. Keep condemning this administration on social media, and bring a friend to this Saturday's No Kings protest. Now is not the time to cower in fear and hide, because that's what the masked Nazis in our communities are doing. And unlike them, we're actually brave and courageous. And it's time to show up and assert ourselves and let it be known that we're not going to bow down to this tin pot dictator, and we are going to stand up for immigrants in our communities and trans people and vulnerable people everywhere. And when we look back at this moment someday, I want it to be known that I was one of the people vociferously against this fascist takeover, and you should be too. So don't back down. Don't silence yourself. Get even louder, because that is how you defeat fascism, not by cowering in fear.
Woke mob. Woke mob.
So go ahead and subscribe to Mike Figueredo at the Humanist Report. And the next we're going to be watching.
I don't think there's anything going to get.
He covers what's happening with Cory Booker, Jennifer Welch from the I've Had It podcast had basically skewered Cory Booker over at AIPAC and whatnot. But yeah, that's
Okay.
Benjamin Netanyahu, do you think he's a war criminal?
Again. Do you ever stop and think, is this real life? Is this really happening? Well, in this video, I have 4 different stories that I want to get to. Stuff that just caught my eye that I think is worth bringing up. Most of it terrible, to be honest with you. But I'm going to end with a nice fun palate cleanser involving Justin Trudeau and Katy Perry. I know it's a ridiculous story, but the way a certain paper covered, I thought was very bizarre. But also in this video, the more important stories. Trump gives up the game, then talks about heaven. Jennifer Welch, the podcaster, breaking Cory Booker with one simple question. Leaked chats from the next wave of Republican leaders as well. So all of that in this video. Let me start with Trump giving up the game and then talking about heaven in a very odd clip. But this starts with this ridiculous photo here. Israeli PM Netanyahu gave President Trump a golden dove. So the golden dove, you know, because these are two very peaceful individuals here. As Henry Fjord writes, guy who bombed the kids gives a symbol of peace to the guy who gave him the bombs. Yeah. So on that point, I'm sure you've already seen Israel has already broken the ceasefire. You know, that's a whole video in and of itself. But here is Trump talking about how he operates. This is him giving up the game.
I mean, Bibi would call me so many times, can you get me this weapon, that weapon, that weapon? Some of them I never heard of, Bibi, and I made them. But we'd get them here, wouldn't we? Huh? And they are the best.
Oh my God! You hear, like, it's like a joke. They're all like laughing or whatnot. Just fantastic. Horrible.
They are the best, but you used them well. It also takes people that know how to use them, and you obviously used them very well.
Use them very well to commit the genocide and destroy Gaza. I guess if you're a fan of weapons, that's how to use them well. It's hard to know how to react to that just because it is so blatantly disgusting, but it actually gets, in terms of the corruption aspect of it, it gets a little worse. I just want to share here this story on the broken ceasefire. You cease, I fire. Israel kills at least 9 in Gaza, says will break truce aid terms. So as they write, Israel's working extremely hard to blow up the ceasefire. That's according to an observer after IDF troops shot dead Palestinians trying to return to their homes. This gets to how Trump has been operating for years as a politician. Pro-Israel donor with $100 million plans to elect Trump. This is a report from last year before the election. This is Miriam Adelson, who, of course, is the widow of the late Sheldon Adelson, who during Trump's 2020 run donated $100 million to Trump and Republicans. Now, what did that get them? Here is Donald Trump discussing.
But every president for decades said, we're going to do it. The difference is I kept my promise and officially recognized the capital of Israel and moved the American embassy to Jerusalem.
Just so you know, Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, is considered occupied territory under international law. It is Palestinian land, where Al-Aqsa and the Dome of the Rock, that's the big golden dome that you see in Jerusalem, that is considered the capital of Palestine and Palestinian land being illegally occupied by Israel. This guy is essentially ignoring international law. And because he's the American president, apparently he's allowed. Because it's Israel, apparently they're allowed. Because international law is actually for everybody but America and Israel. And any Western power, essentially.
Isn't that right, Miriam? Miriam and Sheldon would come into the office. They'd call me. He'd call me. I think they had more trips to the White House than anybody else I could think of. Look at her sitting there so innocently. She's got 60 billion in the bank, 60 billion. And I think she's saying no more. And she loves Israel, but she loves it, and they would come in, and her husband was a very aggressive man, but I loved him. He was a very aggressive, very supportive of me. And he'd call up, can I come over and see you? I say, Sheldon, I'm the president of the United States. It doesn't work that way. He'd come in and we would do. But they were very responsible for so much, including getting me thinking about Golan Heights, which is probably one of the greatest things to ever happen. She loves this.
Golan Heights. Again, under international law, that is Syrian land. It is Syrian land. It is within the internationally recognized borders of Syria. And yet, he gave it to them. He gave it to them. I don't know what that means. He has no right to give anything to them. Right? Again, I don't know what to say, man.
Country, her and her husband are so incredible. We miss him so dearly. But I actually asked her, I'm going to get her in trouble with this, but I actually asked her once, I said, so Miriam, I know you love Israel. What do you love more, the United States or Israel? She refused to answer. That might mean Israel, I must say.
Just worth noting that little comment at the end there is an obvious anti-Semitic trope that, of course, made no headlines, but if any Democrat said that, it would be huge news. That all aside, what Trump is describing there is the corruption that you often have to wait for reporting journalists to investigate, to expose. Trump is just outright telling you, these people gave me a ton of money. They're massive billionaires. They called me up, and even though I didn't have time, I still met with them because they're huge supporters of mine. And I did what they wanted, and I focused on these issues, and I did these things that they asked for. That, like, that's the whole thing. That's everything wrong with how American politics operates. Just laid out there. And does this support base care? Does anybody care? Like this in itself, massive story. Every single day, there are several massive stories. This is a huge story, and it's just going to get lost because there is so much going on right now. This gets to his clip about heaven. He was on Air Force One and made this comment.
You talked about how you hope to end the war in Ukraine because it might help you get into heaven. How does this help? Does this help?
I mean, I'm being a little cute. I don't think there's anything going to get me in heaven, okay? I really don't. I think...
That man doesn't believe in heaven. He just pretends to get the stupid evangelical Christians to vote for him. The man doesn't believe in anything. He only believes in this life. He believes in money, and he believes in doing whatever the hell kind of corrupt shit he can do to get forward.
I think I'm not maybe heaven bound. I may be in heaven right now as we fly in Air Force One. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make heaven.
There are these moments of self-reflection that Donald Trump has that really give you a window into his awareness of what he is doing, what he has done, who he is, despite how he acts usually in public, how he talks himself up. He knows exactly who he is, what he has done, how terrible of a person he is. This gets to the quote that I was reminded of after seeing that clip. This is from 2014. Vox published this article. Trump in 2014, quote, "I don't like to analyze myself because I might not like what I see." It's hard to imagine how somebody can be this self-aware yet not take any steps necessary to reverse course and to try to be a better person. He just completely gives in to his id. And ultimately, I don't think he really enjoys working. I think he enjoys performing. But he, legislates, gives people like Stephen Miller, the absolute worst of the worst, keys to the car, and the U.S. is where it's at. So it's wild to see the sort of awareness from somebody who is such a terrible individual. This gets to the next story. So Cory Booker was on the I've Had It podcast. Jennifer Welch here asks a fantastic question that let's be clear. The question is just a normal question. This is not it's a great question because it's Cory Booker, but it's a question that any politician should be able to answer based on the literal ICC arrest warrant and the numerous human rights organizations, including ones within Israel, that have stated this. But Cory Booker dances around this answer, and that tells you everything you need to know.
Benjamin Netanyahu, do you think he's a war criminal?
Again, these are questions that a lot of people think are the important litmus tests that are loaded and hot. My urgency is to be an effective leader in bringing an end to this crisis. And I get these questions all the time that, to me, undermine my urgency.
I think the thing that Democrats get so frustrated with, where we are right now, where you see like the Zoran Mamdanis and the Graham Plattners rise up, because they can go on podcasts and you can say, do you think Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal? And they just say, yes. And that's the end of it. It's not all of the rhetoric answering. It's like what happens to Democratic politicians, they go through this like prism, and then we can't ever get like the answer to yes or no conversations like you do with Bernie and others. And that's the frustration for the Democratic base with leadership.
Do I think Netanyahu is worse than Trump? Yes.
If you are more concerned about Netanyahu's feelings than you are about acknowledging an ICC arrest warrant, then you can't be trusted as a politician or a leader. How can anybody possibly trust you if you won't recognize these organizations like the ICC, like the UN, that we rely on to uphold some sort of standards? If you don't acknowledge those standards, then how can anybody take you seriously? So Cory Booker, of course, was part of the bipartisan group of senators who met with Netanyahu despite the ICC arrest warrant. There he is, trying to hide his face amongst the crowd of mostly Republicans here. But even people like, of course, Chuck Schumer, Amy Klobuchar there, Ted Cruz, just a gross man. But he's not the only one. Gavin Newsom, as this account writes, Zionist Dem leader Gavin Newsom struggles to speak after podcast host brings up AIPAC. I'll just play this on screen. This is a wild watch because of how he answers this so awkwardly.
Interesting. You're like the first to bring up AIPAC in years, which is interesting.
I will not vote for a candidate that takes $1 from AIPAC.
It's interesting. It's interesting. I haven't thought about AIPAC. And it's interesting. You're like the first to bring up AIPAC in years, which is interesting.
Okay, first off, he can't say another word besides interesting. But what do you mean he hasn't thought about or no one's brought up AIPAC over the last couple of years? Since 2023, AIPAC's been one of the main things people talk about. What are you talking about? a coward. This guy can't be the next president of the United States or at least he can't run as a Democrat. I don't know who the next one should be. Bernie Sanders is retiring, and he should retire. AOC should run for Chuck Schumer's position. I don't know who the next president of runner who should run next for the Democrats, but can't be this guy. This guy's such a feckless loser.
Why did I say that? Not relevant to my day-to-day life.
Okay.
Which is just interesting.
Listen.
It's interesting you say that. JPAC perhaps more, but APAC less and less.
Okay, fair enough.
Which is just interesting.
What's interesting about it?
That it's just interesting as you bring up APAC that it hasn't been part of. I'm just reflecting quite openly and honestly. Hasn't been part of the day-to-day.
Yeah. The only reason why I ask is because with that, what I'm talking about is lobbying in and of itself.
If you thought I said the word interesting a lot, Gavin Newsom, I think, has broken the record on the use of interesting. As Matt Duss writes here, anyone hoping to run in 2028 is going to have to come up with a way better answer on this than it's interesting. And I'm sorry, but Newsom wants us to believe that Van Lathan, who's the podcast host there, is the first person to mention AIPAC to him in years. Come on. It's so absurd. Like the past 2 years, with everything going on, AIPAC all of a sudden is a new idea to you. This is a new topic that hasn't been brought up before. Ridiculous. You're full of shit. So look, I'll give credit to Gavin Newsom on the memeing stuff. He's good on Twitter making fun of Trump. Okay, cool. That doesn't make you a good political leader. That maybe you should run somebody's social media account, but maybe you should not be running a country if you can't acknowledge the how powerful AIPAC has been historically, let alone.
Okay, I do want to bring something up. So a lot of people are focused on AIPAC, and they should be. They are a terrible lobbyist that lead to terrible things, and they take a lot of money. They use a lot of funds to buy politicians to get away with genocide and whatnot. But we have to understand that the Zionist lobby in general, the Israeli lobby in general, is something to be worried about, right? J Street, JPAC, like he was talking about, all these other organizations are also problematic and need to be registered as foreign lobbying groups, right? I know Laura Loomer likes to bring up, well, Qatar and UAE pay a lot of money for lobbying as well. Not in the same way, because they still have people still have negative views of their of what they do. Like, the average person won't tell you that Qatar's great. You know, everyone knows that they're run on a economy. Their economy is run on slave labor. We know that. So they can spend billions of dollars and give a private jet to what's his name, Trump, but it doesn't sway people into allowing them to commit genocide. At least it doesn't purchase consent like these other organizations do. So what I would say is we need to get them all to register as foreign lobbyists and then go from there. When I see people going saying like politicians are saying, I'm no longer taking AIPAC money and I'm going to return all the AIPAC dollars that I got. Yeah, but what about J Street, right? Let's say you got $800,000 from AIPAC, right? And you return that $800,000, but then you take $900,000 from J Street. J Street is more liberal, that is true, but they support the settlements in the illegal settlements in the West Bank. They support the apartheid and the oppression of Gaza. They support. They do not recognize what happened in Gaza as a genocide. I know their president, and a lot of liberals like to point that out to me, that their president has said that it looks like it's genocide. But the official organization, jstreet.org, go to their website. It does not call it a genocide. The official position of the organization is not that it is a genocide, right? So that doesn't count, in my opinion, because the president can be removed and replaced tomorrow. But the organization, if they say it's a genocide, that's harder to come back from. But they don't. Why? Because they are a Zionist lobbying group. And that isn't okay.
Over the past couple of years, Also worth mentioning on this topic, Israel is responsible for 95% of journalist and media worker killings in the Middle East since October 7th, according to October 7th, 2023, according to CPJ data. More than 3 in every 4 journalists and media workers killed worldwide over the past 2 years were Palestinians in Gaza. Again, there have been, a story here and there about this. This is not as widely spread or recognized as it should be. And again, if any other country was doing this, it would be a massive news story. Now, the next story, Politico. I don't know if I can even say this on YouTube. Probably not, and I probably shouldn't. But these leaked messages expose young Republicans' racist chat. This is incredible report. Just chat after chat after chat of the most disgusting shit you will ever read. These are not from, some kids who
are you going to do whatever it takes? If we ever have a leak of this chat, we would be cooked for real, for real. Well, it was leaked. When do we start bullying, dude? Boom, they're dead. It was great. Stay in the closet, F slur. They love the watermelon people. I thought this was talking about Palestinians, but no, they're talking about African Americans because they are racist. And wait, I'm sure he'll show you the people. Bro, I don't know why they think they're white supremacists because they have nothing that is better than anybody. They have no supremacist gene. They are the worst looking trolls you'll ever see. Yeah, let's keep going.
Trying to be edgy and conservative. These are often Republican staffers, people that work for other Republicans, the next generation of Republicans coming up, writing just the most insane garbage you've ever seen. And it is like, it's not surprising. Like when I saw this story, this is definitely a news story. I'm glad it's being reported on. I'm glad it's being shared so that we have, evidence of this. But is anybody really surprised? This is the Republican Party. So of course the people that work for this party and see Donald Trump as their leader are going to think this way and operate this way. So leaders of young Republican groups throughout the country are in this. They refer to black people as monkeys and the watermelon people, quote unquote, amused about putting their political opponents in gas chambers.
All right, I'm actually quite tired. This was just a test stream. It didn't work out so well. The vertical did well, but everything else didn't. So we will reconvene tomorrow and try a different one. Anyways, thank you for watching. The 2 of you that watch, or 3 that watch, thank you, and peace be upon you.